Hello again and welcome to the Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Stephen Soto for sending in some awesome pictures of his Cadian 345th Faust Fortifiers and their supporting air wing of Kazakin Elite, the Searing Rain. Absolutely love the fluff you've got going on with this regiment. I like the little bit of fluff you put on the Facebook post, and I really like the paint scheme and the pictures. And as you said, narrative aside, this is just a nice pure Cadian army, no codex crossing, just grit and determination in facing down the Chaos Hordes. That is why we all play Imperial Guard, isn't it? That is what's at the core of it. So thank you for sending in these really cool pictures, Stephen. If anyone else has got any pictures they'd like me to use in my videos, then please post on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below, and I'll take a look. I can't promise that I'll use everyone's pictures, but I do try and use as many as possible. So without further ado, let's get into today's video, which is we're going to be talking a little bit about, you know, as we often do, we're going to talk about sort of changing meta, and we're going to be talking about, you know, should you be including more air power in your lists? No, and sort of, you know, we're going to compare the Valkyrie to the Leman Russ, which you think you can't really compare those two things. Well, you can, and there's a very realistic possibility that you should. Now, what is old Mordian Glory going on about here? Has he lost his marbles? Has he finally just seen too much shit on the front lines and he's just cracked? Well, let's take a look at this. So the problem that we're facing at the moment in the meta is one of, well, it's almost like a return to 7th edition, where toughness is, you know, and as back in 7th edition, where armor value is starting to mean less and less. Toughness 8 is absolutely, you know, fantastic, and that's what makes the Leman Russ such a standout choice. But as 40k once again descends into potentially the pit of despair as things get more and more powerful, I'm starting to find that my once almost immovable Leman Russes are getting popped pretty quickly, and it's simply because they're big targets, and they're obvious targets as well. And the problem with the Leman Russ is that whilst it's cheap, it's not that cheap. You know, it's really it's you know, when you get a basic Leman Russ, it's 122 points. You slap on your heavy bolter, it's 130. You slap on, you know, the almost mandatory battle cat, you look at 152 points, and that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But you know, it dies very easily in one go. And I had a battle recently versus some Space Marines, and you know, thanks to the fact that Space Marines are now sort of basically got AP4 las cannons, you know, the strength, the toughness different. You know, las cannons are making a big comeback in Space Marine armies. You know, the fact that the toughness 7, toughness 8 difference between, you know, Imperial Guard flyers and Leman Russes is not a big deal anymore. And you know, the armor, they've got the same armor value. But what amazes me about, you know, let's take the Valkyrie for example, is the fact that it has 14 wounds. It is a tough old beast, which means it does take that little bit more firepower to take off the board. And what I was finding typically with Space Marines, for example, is between the fact they've got rerolls to hit mostly, or you know, all the time, reroll 1s to wound a lot of the time, you know, nearly all the time, Captain Lieutenant combo, -4 AP, las cannons. Yeah, what I'm finding is that my venerable old Leman Russ is struggling, and so I'm starting to think what really starts bringing the Valkyrie back into contention is, well, firstly, it's got more wounds. It's a 14 wound model, as previously mentioned. And, you know, I'm using the Valkyrie as an example, guys. There are plenty of the flyers out there, you know, that you can pick from if you're willing to go into Forge World. But we'll stick with Valkyries just for now, because they're the ones that everyone's most familiar with. So it's got 14 wounds. So the Valkyrie has an inbuilt -1, which means against weapons which are, you know, which makes it inherently better against some weapons and equal to others. So what I'm talking about here. So if you've got a weapon that's strength 8, then it wounds the Leman Russ on 4s, sure. It does wound the Valkyries on 3s, but then the Valkyries have that -1 built in. So it kind of balances out. It kind of balances out. It's I think math hammer wise, that's pretty much equal. So what that means is against weapons which, for example, like las cannons, which as we've said, especially in Space Marine lists, are really making a bit of a comeback. Aspirations of the new hotness. Las cannons, the Valkyrie is inherently is more durable. So, you really have you have to think about that, and then also the fact that Valkyrie does put out a decent amount of firepower. The old Valkyrie. I mean, the fact that you take the typical multiple missile pods. That's 2d6 heavy bolter shots right there, but they're assault, so it can move without suffering the penalty. Okay, that's a little bit like grinding advance in a way. Obviously, it's not the same weapon. But then you've got your 2 heavy bolters as well. So then you've basically got 2 heavy bolters plus 2d6 heavy bolters. So this thing is kind of rocking the equivalent of 4 heavy bolters, which is pretty good. That's actually really worth thinking about. Plus you have the multi-laser. Now, if you take it with the multi-laser, the Valkyrie comes out at it's less than 130 points. It really is a cheap vehicle. I mean, it's 137 with the las cannon. So without the las cannon and with the multi-laser, so it's 122 points. Now, I know a lot of people see the las cannon as almost a mandatory upgrade, and I would also definitely consider the las cannon on the Valkyrie because the multi-laser is pretty cack. But but if without the las cannon, if you're going for a budget option, if you want to get cheap armor on the field that's going to sling down some decent firepower, then you want to be looking at the multi-laser, in which case it's 122 points, and you could reasonably say it's 122 points and you're getting the equivalent of basically 5 heavy bolters. It's not bad when you factor in then the transport capacity, which really should not be overlooked. I know a lot of people think the Valkyrie's taken a bit of a hit since the Bulgun nerf, and it's true, it has. But what I tend to find the Valkyrie really good for now is basically that late game sort of objective grab or late game sort of tipping point. So there'll often be a point in a game where if both lists are doing really well and both players are playing the best, it's a bit where it could go either way, and it's often the player who's managed to hold on to their reserves for a little longer will tend to win. That's what the Valkyrie allows you to do. It allows you to bring in a nice a tipping point squad, as you could call it. Maybe that's veterans with plasma. Maybe that's a couple of special weapon squads. Maybe that's command squads. These things can definitely deliver the hurt where it's needed, and they'll generally get there as well. I tend to find that Valkyries are kind of difficult to get rid of until they go into hover mode. Now, speaking of hover mode, this is really where the Valkyrie and other vehicles as well, but especially the Valkyrie, tends to shine, because when it's in hover mode, it doesn't have that -1 to hit anymore from moving. And Valkyries actually get a +1 to hit. So, you're looking at a vehicle which is hitting on 3s then. Now, hitting on 3s is a really valuable commodity in the Guard. Really valuable. I mean, tank commanders considered the best, one of the best units Guard can field. Okay, they are. And that's because they have the ability to hit on 3s and to tell themselves to reroll 1s. Now, Valkyries can get something very similar. Valkyries can hit on 3s if they go into hover mode, and if you take a officer of the fleet, then then you can get your Valkyries to reroll 1s as well. So suddenly you've got a vehicle there for 122 points, which is hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s. That is a significant amount of anti-infantry firepower, and you've got the guys inside. And if you take, you should never dismiss the guys inside at all. You should never dismiss that. Don't forget, guys can still. What makes the Valkyrie unique is people can get out of it after it's moved. And if you start looking at things like the Tempestus drop force, then it starts becoming a bit of a no-brainer. Now, I don't want loads of people there thinking the Leman Russ is rubbish. It's not. The Leman Russ is good. You know, it is a solid, dependable vehicle, and it does put out, you know, undeniably good firepower. It's just a case of when you've taken your 3 tank... What I often find is when you've taken your 3 tank commanders, and you start taking regular Leman Russes, those regular Leman Russes never seem to pull their weight. You know, because they hit on 4s, and if they degrade, they hit on 5s. No, what I've found is people fear tank commanders, but they don't fear the regular Leman Russ. They're aware of it, but they don't fear it. And the regular Leman Russ doesn't, unlike the tank commander, which, like I said, with that ability to hit on 3s, reroll 1s with a beast of like a thing like the Hammer of Sunderance. You know, tank commanders are deservedly feared, but no one really fears the basic Leman Russ because it only hits on 4s. It doesn't really, unless you're going very one specific regiment, you don't really have the ability to reroll 1s. So it's just not a scary threat. And bear in mind, we're talking, you know, we're comparing here a basic Leman Russ versus a fully tooled up Valkyrie. You know, if we go 137 points versus 152 points, the Valkyrie is cheaper, just as tough, has transport capacity, and is very good against, you know, it has a las cannon which will hit on 3s, rerolling 1s, and it has those 4 heavy bolters equivalent. That's a decent amount of firepower. Maybe not quite equivalent to Leman Russ, but maybe like 80% of the way there. You know, which is you know, Leman Russ at most will have 2 heavy bolters and a las cannon, and then you know the main cannon. So that's 4 weapon systems. Now the Valkyrie gets 2 heavy bolters like the Leman Russ, and then it gets a las cannon like a Leman Russ can get, and then you get the 2 multiple rocket pods, which is, you know, which is where the comparison sort of falls down, because, you know, obviously that's trying to compete with the battle cannon. But those 2 multiple rocket pods are still really, really good against their intended target. And again, hitting on 3s, rolling 1s. So I'm starting to include, whenever I always go through the same process with Valkyries. I talk about them, I get excited about them, I use them for 2 or 3 games, they perform really well, and then for some reason I just take them out of my list again. And I really think, as you know, guard players have got to start trying new things out. You've got to start trying those new things out, because, you know, Leman Russes are good, but they're slowly, like Leman Russes are like an example of the guard codex as a whole. They started off amazing, and then every release that comes out, they get that little bit less efficient, a little bit less good. You know, but I think the point that really sort of sells me on the air power side of things is that, you know, we're looking at a Valkyrie fully tooled up versus a Leman Russ bare bones. What if we start fully tooling up the Leman Russ? You know, we start adding that las cannon, those plasma cannons which people are so fond of. You know, that's when the Leman Russ starts pushing the 185 point mark. Well, at that price point, you know, people can start looking into getting vultures. Vultures are a Imperial Guard flyer with a fearsome reputation. They get the strafing run rule, which means that when they're shooting ground targets, they get +1 to hit. So even if they move, they're still hitting on 4s. And they've got twin Punisher cannon, just 40 shots. Now, if you go into hover mode with the Vulture, you know, you're looking at 40 shots, hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s if you get that Officer of the Fleet. They're about 200 points. These things. I don't even think they're that much. I actually haven't got the points in front of me. Apologies. But you know, they're very reasonable. They're the equivalent price of a Leman Russ. So you have to ask yourself that again: am I better off taking something like a Vulture, or which is going to have, you know, better turn 1 durability and potentially, you know, other turn durability, or am I better off getting the Leman Russ? I don't know, and I'm starting to lean towards air power. I'm really starting to lean towards air power. My mindset's always been tanks, but I'm thinking if you're there with your 3 tank commanders, and then you're thinking of taking 2 or 3 other regular Leman Russes, I wouldn't bother. I'd start thinking about, I'd try them Valkyries out. I really would. I really, really would. give it a go. It might work, it might not, but I can tell you in my experience, whenever I've included my pair of Valkyries in my list, I've never been disappointed. I've got a good friend who's, you know, probably say my best friend, who's recently got into 40k. He's got the Pure Scion army. He's got 2 Valkyries in his list, and we had a game versus my World Eaters to give him a go against the Assault army, and his Valkyries tore it up. Now, you know, he's won 2 out of the last 3 games he's played. You know, and that's with Pure Scions, and I'd say his Valkyries, well, personally, be on the receiving end of them. I think they're really, really good assets. An air path, but like I said, don't just think this is a Valkyrie video. It's not. I'm just using that because it's familiar and people can, you know, understand it. But, you know, things like the Vultures and the Vendettas. Vendettas are a bit iffy, but still really good if you're looking for 4 las cannons. Don't look, you know, on a durable platform. I think the 2 best. I think what you have to accept is air power is in the guard is typically best at taking out infantry. That's kind of what it's dedicated towards. But yeah, and so that's what you should really be thinking about. But you know, so I guess the question is, this is where I'll sort of end the video, and you can put some comments down on how and what you think about this, which is if your air power is contributing to your, you know, anti-infantry with those heavy bolters missile pods, you know, probably, you know, maybe a single las can will help, but typically you're looking at, you know, it's not a huge amount. Where do you get your anti-tank from then? Do you then start putting plasma in those Valkyries and you make them these one-stop shops? Or, as I've started doing, relying on my infantry to just drown the enemy in heavy weapons and special weapons. That's where my focus has been. So I'll probably do another video specifically looking at the Leman Russ and how it sort of changed in the meta. I may do that, I may not do that. I have spoken about the Leman Russ at length in the past. But just let me know if that's a video you want to see. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. Are we sort of shifting towards a sort of air superiority guard meta? Is that where we're shifting? Because I think pure infantry is really good, and that's where my focus would be. But you know, there are many different paths to the guard. So let me know what you think, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.